Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today, I'm really thrilled that I'm going to speak to Leonora, who I discovered actually quite recently. I watched her conversation on Buddha at a Gas Pump. And as I listened to her, I could just basically describe what I was hearing as embodiment, as an embodied person. And whenever I see someone like this, I get excited and I want to talk and I want to talk about it because I think it's such an important topic. Hi, Leonora.
Hello, Maggie. So nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's wonderful. We actually happen to be closer to each other time-wise because Leonora is in Bali and I'm in Thailand, so we're only an hour apart. Otherwise, if I were in the UK, that would be a bit tricky to organize because the time difference is much bigger. So I was thinking there's been so much talk about embodiment recently. So I would love to hear your thoughts about it in the context of your own journey, perhaps to start with. And when was it that you first realized that embodiment was actually pretty important in the context of awakening?
Yeah, that's a big question that can go in lots of different divergences. Um, I think it was natural for me to focus on embodiment because I was so disconnected. And, when you're disconnected, you often don't know it. So you can live quite a lot of your life that way. And sometimes something happens to kind of pull you back in and to take you on a different path. And I think often we can perceive those things as, in themselves traumatic. I want to go this way, and the soul's going, no, you're going that way. So, it can disrupt your life, that realignment to coming on your path. And I would also like to say, our language is so important and it can mislead. So people say, I awakened. And I would say, well, I can't say that because if I say I, then there's something here that isn't awake, and
Mm-hmm.
every moment is a new moment. So there's no place called awakened, right? So we are in a divine process of choosing this moment, choosing this moment, choosing this moment. And that's really what we've been given. We've been given that choice to choose the moment. And so that's in a nutshell, my view about embodiment is it's an ongoing, process of bringing the soul and the divinity into intimacy with inside the body, into a meeting point of that dynamic between divinity, the light of the soul, and the personality, the integration of those elements.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I'm still in process. The real quest that we're on here is, who am I, right? And what's shaping me right now? And
Mm-hmm.
so all the things that are unresolved, for example, that are in my, what I call a bubble, it's a technical term for the field. Yeah. So all those pieces of information are in my field right now, the things that are shaping me. And for example, that can include trauma, right? So some event happened, I was born, right? And the doctor pulled me out and slapped my bum, right? Well, I might have had that as a trauma. So something that an adult or a person who's already disconnected would assume is no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
How we're born, the energy of the environment, and all these things can be perceived by an infant is very sensitive and very sense aware and doesn't have a conscious mind, doesn't have a story, is
Mm-hmm.
like just totally dependent. So in that dynamic, that could be perceived as a trauma, and the root that can become the root of many future experiences, right? In relation to other, ability to trust, feel safe, all these different kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not to understand in words what happened and what it means and what to do about it. That's helpful at best, yeah, but often in the way. So you understand it through an alchemical process of connecting with the felt sense of your field, of your bubble, right? And that resolution is natural. It's like, it doesn't happen because you want it to happen. It happens just because you're connected, and you can be aware of it. In 1991, I think it was, I had a big awakening, from whoever I was, which was, a kind of a normal person, having a job and doing different things, to an experience, and it was triggered by a death, right? And a lot of grief coming up as a result of that. And it was actually my father's death, so let's make it really personal. And a lot of grief coming up from that. And in that process it was very cathartic. I was on my own. I actually could not be in my body. And I became aware that I was not in my body. So there's a lot of confusion in that. It's like, okay, I was somewhere up there looking at my body, and I didn't feel any personal attachment to my body. And I felt this connection to another dimension, let's say, though I don't like the word dimension, but to a place beyond where I normally perceive the world from, right? So I had that experience, and that was life-changing. It was the catalyst for, leaving the rat race, leaving my job, and finding different lifestyles and many other things. Yeah.
Was that the same moment that you described as sort of giving up, which I would love to talk about, because I think it's such a theme, and that's how it often happens to people, where the mind can only go so far, the struggle sort of exhausts itself, so to speak, and there's a moment where many people, at least that's also been my experience, where I feel life has surrendered me to the point of
yes.
and I remember you talking about it during the interview on Buddha the gas pump. So was that after this particular experience, or was it around the same?
Yeah, so there's many facets to that experience, and I don't need to share them unless they're of value to people. But what you said, the giving up is a really important piece. So when somebody important dies, like a father or a mother, you have all the idea of who you are that has power over what happens tomorrow and what life is about cannot live in that level of grief, right? So death is one of the best waker-uppers that you can find, right? Because it's like you spend your whole life avoiding it, but it's going to happen anyway. So you might as well give up, So yeah, the quality of grief was contained within this giving up, this surrender, this but the challenge of accepting what happened, and allowing what happened, and all of that were all mixed up together, and my system was quite chaotic, generally, but more so in that experience. And so it was like I couldn't put all the pieces into a place where they could integrate and they could, transmute and transform and all of that. It was just like I was in this wild place. So on the one hand, there was all this grief, but on the other hand, I was out of my body, looking at my body, and I felt no attachment to it. It was okay. It was not even me. It was kind of like that. It was like my body. So yeah, it's a hard thing to understand. And I'd say in some way it took many years, and maybe it's still part of the journey for me of unpacking that, the particular dynamic of my experience at that moment or at that time, I can see has flavors in other moments and other times.
Yeah.
So they're like all these little threads woven into a tapestry, and you can follow one thread and pull that thread out of the tapestry, so you have a different picture. But there's a lot of threads in this tapestry. So to get the clarity is like finding a thread and taking it home. Taking it to beyond the idea and the beliefs and the thoughts and of what your story is. You taking it home. It's an alchemical process where that thread just dissolves and disappears, and therefore you don't have a story about it anymore.
So you have this incredibly profound experience, and then your life sort of changes, at least externally, in terms of, like you said, leaving the rat race. And I don't know if this is where you moved to Bali as well. But what happens from there in terms of where does this profound experience takes you?
So there was a lot of big changes, to leave the job. I was living in New Zealand at the time on a small island, and actually, no, sorry, I was living in the city, near the city, and then I moved to this small island. That was one of the changes, and I quit my job, and I met my partner, and we did this permaculture project together in a community where we built a eco house, solar panels, compost toilets, and kind of went back to nature. And I ended up putting together a lavender garden. So I grew lavenders, and then I made essential oil out of my flowers. And then I made a whole series of skincare and things out of the lavender oil, and just sold it locally at the market. And, it wasn't like there was a plan. It was moving out of this planning mode into, like, I've got a jigsaw puzzle and here are all the pieces. Now, what picture do you want to make with these pieces? It's not like, oh, this doesn't feel right, I think I'll go somewhere else. It was like accepting and allowing all the pieces that you were being given, and even having gratitude for them, let's say. Then assembling them, into something in the moment, right? So I want to say that there's a progression from who I was then to who I am now. And the only progression in some way is that I'm more unraveled, that I'm less of somebody on a timeline with a past and a future. I'm more able to be just here in the moment, and and allow that, whatever's happening. So so that was the process, and I was very, very bad at it, but there was also a sense of a different view of life because of the grief that I'd gone through. And in the end of that dynamic, in the loss of my father, there was the Leonora who was shaped by him, both epigenetically, because I grew up with him, and also genetically, because his ancestors influenced him and he influenced me at a genetic level. So it's the epigenetics and the genetics is a big piece, right, of what shapes you and how you show up in the world. And so the loss of that, the grief of that, is not just the grief that he left, is the grief that I died with him. It's like the I that I was in relationship to him could no longer play out that drama because he wasn't there. Right. So the death was a death of me as I showed up with all those dynamics to some extent. Yeah. And the clarity became more of, noticing what's mine and what's not mine, and you never get to the end of that, because at one level it's all me, and at another level it's just this bit is mine, right? And we are, in that sense, in the work that I do, which I call embodied truth, we are collapsing the timelines to return to now, to be just here now. And in the now, if you can fully inhabit the now, you find divinity. And divinity is the one life. It's like we're all, you are my sister, you know, we're all coming from the same source. We're all, you know, generated from that source. We're all emerging from that source, and we're all dying back into that source from that one standpoint. But there's something unique about you, and there's something unique about me. And that's the differences, right? And so the uniqueness is your particular gift. You know, what is it that brings you joy? What is it that you came to share? And so the discovery of your gift is super important, because that's your uniqueness. And I didn't really have a good handle on that. I was just more of this sort of shamanic, I don't like that word either, let's say shapeshifter, you know. So you could throw me, this is the 8th country that I'm living in, you could put me somewhere and I would adapt.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, so I was like, I was influenced so strongly by the external. So I became whoever I needed to become based on my surroundings. And in some way, we're all doing that. But some of us have a stronger proclivity to be kind of empty and just, you know, adapt. And then others of us have a stronger proclivity to be here. And this is me, and I want to take up space, and I'm going to tell you what to do. So, you know, there's a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
From one end to the other. And I was very far on the empty spectrum. And it was because I don't really know, but this is doing what I do. This is what I've concluded, and I am open to adjusting my conclusion, of course. But I had a death shock trauma as a 6-month-old infant.
Oh, wow.
And that means that in some way, it means that when you have a trauma that doesn't resolve within, you know, a short time, that what happens is that your system splits off from you. It can often leave your body, or it goes up to your head, but often it leaves your body. And if you have shock, it leaves, right? So you have a shock and you're out, and your nervous system cannot integrate. So you're now overwhelmed, so you're out. And you can come back in if it feels safe around you and if you have loving support. So the circumstances of my death shock was I didn't have any of that. So what happened was, you know, I had this kind of unique experience, let's say, of disconnecting before I'd actually connected, right? Because an infant is born 100% dependent, not like a chimpanzee. You know, they can get going without that kind of dependency. But for us, even though we're similar, you know, biologically to and genetically to chimpanzees, it's like what happens with the trauma is you split the trauma and you become separate, right? So you split, and like for me, I was out there and the trauma's in my body, and I can't come back in because it never felt safe and I never felt the loving support. So what happens in that is that your natural development, what a baby would naturally have, you know, before the age of 2, there are things that need to develop in how the brain works and how the body works and how the motor system movement system works, and many, many things, how the eyes work, the ears work, you know, all these different things. All of that was kind of like stuck in that moment. So
how did you come to know that?
It's been 30 years of unpicking little pieces. You know, I have this capacity, which I teach people as well. It's like, I don't teach them, I guide them, and they get it or they don't get it. But I have this capacity to hold the whole tapestry. I mean, that's one of the gifts that I have from my experience, is that I have the capacity to have the sort of bird's eye view. and to see it all and to hold the whole thing. So I had this, this is kind of, I'm going to make a joke here because it's like blow your mind, can't be real kind of stuff. It's like I had in some way a super consciousness, right? That was my gift. And it was like my brains were working at gamma levels and, brain waves and all of this kind of thing. But at the same time, I was super unconscious. At the same time, I was conscious of everything except me.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's like I was reversed. I was on the other side of the veil. That's what I was tapped into. And I call it the baby conscious state because I don't have a good name for it. So I was like tapped into that state. So, the sense of meeting other people, I would feel one with them. And this is why I would adapt to them, because they were me. And also because I had this dependency in my consciousness because I was still an infant. So I did not get all this information in one day. If I had, I probably wouldn't be here. I probably wouldn't have made it. It would be too much to take in. So I got this information over many years of sitting in stillness, asking the question, who am I and why am I here? Those are really fundamental questions, and information appears to you in your field, right? But it doesn't appear if you want answers to the question. It appears because you're really willing to die in that question.
That is beautiful.
There's no agenda to I want to get somewhere, I want to know this so that I can be okay. It's really, I'm willing to die in that question, and I'm really willing to become new in that question. And I'm just very open and very curious. They're fundamental pieces to that intention. It's an intention. It's a prayer. Okay, it's not a process. It's a prayer, because you don't know how to go there. How do you know how to develop your brain when you're 30-something years old? You don't. So you better realize that you don't know anything, and you have to find grace in that. And what I found was the fear and the vulnerability and the separation, because that experience was so big, that experience for a small baby in particular was so big, that not only could I not integrate it, but my parents couldn't integrate it, so there was this kind of setup that I don't have resources, there's nobody here, that can hold me. Became one of the themes, if you will, in my journey. So, anyway.
Can you talk, since we're at it, I'm going to try to ask this question clearly, but I don't know whether I'm going to succeed. Because here's what I've been observing as I've been listening to people or seeing people one-on-one, is that there's this belief that unless I find all my traumas, all my wounds, and I heal them, then awakening is not available.
That's a path to suffering. Everybody comes to me, like some people I say, you are not ready. I don't say it to them, but I can feel it in me. And because they want to fix themselves or they want to heal themselves, and the I that wants to heal, bless him or her, is like interfering because they can't be with the moment. Like the nature of trauma inside your field makes it difficult for you to be in the moment. The only way that you could be in the moment is if you accepted and allowed that trauma to be there. And it's only through the acceptance and allowance of that information, which is part of you, to be there, that it will transmute itself. So if you're a person with an identity that goes, I need to fix all my trauma, you are in there's two of you. There's the I that has an agenda, I want to fix my trauma, and then there's the trauma. So there's two pieces now, they're in separation. And so you will never succeed, right? And I didn't, but I learned, that's how you learn. You do it wrong, you do it, I think Einstein said, if you keep doing the same things and get the same results,
That's
you
like
know.
insanity. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
insane. So eventually you hit your head on the wall enough times, you go, oh, that doesn't work, right? So then
Yeah.
you adapt. For me, it's an ongoing process. You adapt to more of a, say, a quest. Yeah. And the quest is born out of the heart, let's say the heart, out of divinity, out of the soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's grace. You can choose to put your awareness, even right now, there in your heart. And when you do, you're accessing a different level of consciousness. And it's one of the easiest and closest places to connect with the divine source is through the
Mm-hmm.
heart. So the eye that wants to fix is up here. It's like this is the head consciousness. And it's looking, oh, I've got a problem there. I've got a problem there or whatever. And, oh, I've got a pain. I want to get rid of that. And the information is inside the pain. And if you are in a position that says, I've got a pain, I want to get rid of it, it won't talk to you. The pain will not reveal its secrets to you because you're trying to get rid of it. It's not loving. But if you allow and accept it and include it as part of your whole journey, right, then it will inform you in this meditation or in the meditation next year or and the more you open and allow and accept and zoom into it and include it,
Mm-hmm.
the more it will talk to you. It will give you information, and it might not give it to you in words. It might just give you light, because when it resolves, it goes back to the source and re-emerges as light without the pain, because the truth is you are light, right?
Yeah.
So it's the separation that's causing the suffering and the darkness.
And also I've noticed like there's a lot of fear that comes with that as well, because if someone operates from a belief that unless I figure all my traumas and find them and heal them or get rid of them or fix them or whatever, then I'll never awake, then that in of itself is creating such a, so much fear
Yes,
that it
yeah,
kind of backfires, right?
does. But it's where you start, and I used to I jokingly say, it's not really a joke, I'm a wounded healer. It's like I think that the reason that I have the gift that I do is because of all the shit that happened to me, right? And for many years it was poor me, because it was just too much. But then something at some point moved into a creative engagement with life, which was more about what can I do here? What can I choose something different? Because just like you said, the I that has that position is holding you stuck. As long as your relationship with yourself has trauma between you and yourself, then the quest has to be how to find the oneness of those two, because it's really going into the trauma and noticing the identity and noticing divinity, which is stillness, that trinity of those three elements that collapses the experience that you're in. And that's a practice. It's not like, oh, I just tell you that and you can do it. Actually, some people can. You can just say something to them and they got it, But for the most part, 99%, it's going to be, you have to practice. So what do you need to practice, right? So you're practicing life. You're either practicing drinking coffee, or you're practicing trying to meditate, in which case the trying is in the way and you have to see it. Now, you could spend years meditating on the pillow, following instructions, and not notice that there's a you in separation trying to do a meditation, right? You can literally waste years because you're trying to fit into somebody else's map. So the first step with when something appears in your bubble is to welcome it, right? So that's much easier to do if you're oriented in the heart rather than the head. So the beginning steps are to move your awareness from here to the heart. But ultimately, you need to integrate the thinker, the feeler, and the doer, the belly, the three. But in the beginning, it's the easiest for people if they can connect with their light, which often many people can, actually, if they just put their awareness in their heart with the right intention, not with trying. And then when you're there and there's a pain arising, I use this sort of metaphor of King Arthur's round table. There's this round table in your heart, and you're sitting at the table. And when the pain arrives, you invite the pain to come and sit at the table with you and have some tea. So you are welcoming it. You are including it. It is part of you, right? So that's love, right? So you allow it to sit down and then you get to know it. It's like, there it is, here I am, you know. And as you do, there it is, here I am, there, you start getting closer together. It's like, oh, we've got a lot in common. Let's have a closer conversation. And so as you get closer and closer, the pain feels loved and and you feel safe and so on and so forth. And then the pain can just go home. Right? So that's the first step. But sometimes the pain doesn't go home. It just stays there. And then you have to say, well, why is it still there? Okay, I mean, some pain takes a while to heal. You know, it can be physiological, like I had structural issues and so on. If the pain has not gone, then we have to look at who is having the experience that's appearing right now. And you'll notice that that one is not sitting at the round table with you, right? She's up here. She's looking down at the round table from a distance, right? So you want to kind of put your awareness in your heart and look at her. As long as you can notice her, and this is more challenging, it takes time and practice, but the identity is the matrix. I'm running a group at the moment. I called it Exit the Matrix. So it's learning about what is creating the matrix, what is creating the perception that I have, right? What is creating this relationship that I have with the pain in my knee, right? So if you're in that kind of a quest, you can see that your perception is entangled with your experience. And once you see the truth of your perceiver, let's say, again, it's just a felt sense experience. And let's say it's behind your eyes or in your eyes, that she's looking through your eyes, right? Like she's got rose-colored glasses on, right? So everything looks rosy. Yeah. I don't get the blue light. I got just red, right? So it's literally like you take your glasses off and you can see it all. And that's what we're doing. We're learning to discern between the matrix structure that we normally look through versus being the pure awareness that is not identified with anything and noticing the one who's looking, the one with the red glasses, and then inviting her to sit at the round table of your heart. And as these parts of you commune, they come together naturally. It's an alchemy. And the third element is also a practice. It's like we may think we're sitting in stillness, but there still might be an identity having an experience of stillness. So it's like, was the many years challenge for me, is can I differentiate between my stillness and my chaos? Because death gives you stillness, right? And a lack of discernment, in my case, was giving me stillness. So I didn't have the discernment because I didn't have the full proper brain development, let's say, or, you know, I had knocked my head a few times. Maybe that did it. I don't really know. I just guess. But the important thing is when you think you know something, is not to believe yourself, but just to hold that information. Because as soon as you believe the story the conclusion that you've just made, you've actually stopped the process of healing. Because as soon as you know something, it becomes a new matrix. So it's tricky.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that, you know, the longer we're sort of in the process, the subtler the resistance to any kind of discomfort becomes, and the mind can trick you into thinking in
exactly.
such an intelligent way that you're not resisting or trying to get rid of anything anymore, when actually you are. And I think that this is one of the most, I can imagine, I'm not speaking from experience here, but I can imagine how the practitioners who are able to reach certain, let's call them transcendental states, right? If they can reach them quite easily, I can kind of see how easy the mind can sort of hijack this and
Yes,
use it as a way to basically a high, you know, using transcendent state as a hiding place, right?
yes, I did that, you
You
know.
did. Talk about that.
I think it's, to try to not do that is just another identity avoiding the wrong path. So,
Yes.
it's like you have to embrace wherever you are and just keep learning. I always say to people, because when I work with people, you can see, for me, I can see quite clearly that they have an end point to their journey. They want to have a meditation and get this experience or this result, or they want to do it right, or and so maybe they want to learn as well. But I say to people, it's really a journey of discovery, and that is the only way that you will get information, because as soon as there's an I doing anything, trying, or whatever, it's going to derail the process of your unfoldment. So it's like the ego always wants to learn and do it right, but it's
Yes.
coming from an agenda to get an outcome. But the truth seeker is like, doesn't need an outcome, right? And you have to develop that truth seeker, because you get to a place where, let's say, you're very masterful at getting your outcomes. And I actually was, I was getting good outcomes quite often. There was still a lot of suffering in me, but I was getting these outcomes. But I was misusing my power, right, to get those outcomes. And at some point, you get a slap in the face, and the rug gets pulled out from underneath you, and you're all of a sudden you have a series of crappy experiences. And you thought you were one of God's chosen people or something, and now you realize that you're not. So
Oh, what a bummer.
yeah. But it's like there's different stages. We go through different initiations, but we have to go through that stage of humbling, because the one who mastered a whole bunch of alchemy and this, that, and the other, was still an identity attached to that mastery, right? So it's like she doesn't know what she doesn't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she thinks that she can navigate, and there's still a separation in that. So at some point the rug gets pulled out, and I think this was about 7 or 8 years ago for me. The rug that I was on got pulled out. I realized in my own journey, and this is a little bit unique, it's not for everyone, but I realized in my own journey that it was not about surrendering to my true self, as if my true self was there. It was surrendering to the path of the creation of my true self, because my true self was never born. She was holding so much ancestral trauma. She had a death shock at the beginning, et cetera, right? So it was like, wow, not only do I have to surrender to nothing, but I have to watch the emergence of a new brain and a new body and this is embodiment, because it's a purification process. And it turns out, that the intelligence to regenerate bone is inside your field, and it turns so you're not relying on somebody that's going to give you a prescription or the blue pill, right? You're on the red pill journey. It's like, so you're surrendering to that. Oh, my body's falling apart. I just lost 10 kilos, and all the elasticity's gone, and this is happening, and it was like every day something really profound was happening. And I had to ask my divine masculine to show up to that in a tranquil way. And I can just tell you, I failed 1,000 times until I got it, you know. And I knew at some point this was not it, because there was an element in that of not panic, but of like, I'm going to die. And that was my trauma. I'm going to die, right? And so it was like being okay that I'm going to die because I'm no longer the I, I'm not the body. It's a whole initiation and journey of discovering what is the body. And what you discover is, and this is also in quantum physics and quantum mechanics, is that the spirit and the matter are the same. They're the same. They're one, right? If you keep going in and in and in and in and in, you know, and you get to the smallest point, you find an atom that's in a spin. And where's the energy for spinning that atom coming from? It's coming from the source, right? So you are only energy. Matter is not separate from energy. Matter is energy in form. So you're formless in form. And so this is the kind of discovery. Now, I want to say, I was useless at this. I failed, I suffered, I struggled. But eventually I started to find this tiny little speck of light that I thought I have to head towards that, you know, and that was the process of, okay, this is what's happening. It's really shit. You can't be with it. Nobody that you know can be with it. So they don't want you around. So you're on your own with it. And then it's like, okay, but how do I create a new it, right? And I don't have an answer to that. I don't know how to do that, but my system does. And all I had to do was align with that. And I had to get out of the little I that's trying to save herself to a bigger I, to a we, because I came here to share a message. I came here to go through this shit so that I understood how to share this message, right? That was my path. That's why I did, that's all the things that happened were to help me do that.
Yeah.
So, and if I can do it, I can tell you anybody can do it.
You know, I understand that there's always this sort of wanting to do the how to and have like steps to follow, and I sometimes feel like I'm so boring because I keep on saying the same thing, which is just to be with whatever is going on, just with curiosity. And as long as there's that openness and curiosity to be with that,
Exactly.
then eventually something's gonna come up. And this is why I loved what you said earlier, that this is very different to trying to push for answers or trying to figure something out, you know, like sort of in your head, as opposed to just being and waiting for just something to come up. There's something that you mentioned I really loved, and I don't know if we can kind of combine the two, so be free to do it however you want. But there's two things that really resonated with me that you said. There was like a moment where you said you dropped the mastery of being able to do whatever you did during meditation, and you swapped it into the mastery of vulnerability. And I loved it so much because I think vulnerability is such a massive part of this journey. I mean, so much so that I can totally admit that for a very long time, I didn't even know what that means to be vulnerable, to be
Me
honest.
either.
So,
Me either. It's like how many people feel safe enough to be vulnerable,
right. Yeah.
and the mastery becomes another matrix of coping.
Yeah.
If you just look at my own life, like the contrast between, you know, super conscious and super unconscious is like I had an infant state that was not shaped, was not formed, you know, hadn't fully developed, and had a death shock. So I had a lot of issues with shock. You know, I had hormonal hypothalamus issue, all these kinds of things, because, you know, everybody was overweight and I was underweight. You know, everybody was this and I was that. You know, so it was always everything that the world was dealing with. I had a completely different pathway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, most people are in going up. I was out coming in. you know, so it's like it's not really just a descending pathway. It's always a descending, ascending pathway. But the preponderance was, you know, to get in. For me, the vulnerability was to become a wounded infant that was 100% dependent on other. And the trauma was going, don't trust anybody. Nobody could show up. And that was the experience I kept repeating, right? So it was like, okay, so how do you allow yourself to be this wounded person? Like years ago, I couldn't share with you anything about me that was vulnerable. It was just like, that's got to remain hidden. Nobody can know that. It was so hidden that I didn't even know it, right? So life will bring you what you need. So the things that triggered my vulnerability start to come. And fortunately, I had developed enough presence to be able to meet that. And bit by bit, it's like, oh, now we found out that you have sleep apnea because you have a structural issue in the joint at C1. Okay, now we found out that you have inflammation in your brain. Okay, can you be here with that? Now we found out, you know, and it was literally, and sometimes it was almost 3 or 4 or 5 of those a week, right?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
It was a huge testing, right? And all I can tell you is I kept failing and failing and failing until I got to a place of really understanding who I am beyond the body, right? And the ability to discern between that source field and the chaotic field of death, because I had a death experience, right? And I got stuck there because I couldn't come back. So then I had all those issues to deal with, you know, like, where's my will? You know, it's like, you don't have a will, right? And, you know, there's an illusion of choice. We do have a choice, but at the same time, paradoxically, the ego is never making a free choice. The ego is always making a conditioned choice.
Exactly.
So, yes. So the only choice is to become the mystery, you know, to become the unknowable, to become your soul, to just open to life completely, even if it includes your death. And that was the nature of my journey. I can only tell you it was a hellish journey, but at the same time, I wouldn't trade it for anything, because the incredible beauty within all of that, the learnings, you know.
Yeah. And this, I think it's kind of related. You talked also a lot about the edge of comfort zone. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That it's how much of this journey is coming and kind of really discovering life, kind of exposing those edges, I think, to ourselves, and right?
Yeah, I was sharing something with my group a few days back, and they had all decided they were interested in manifestation. And so I said, okay. So I did a video for them on manifestation. But the thing about manifestation is, firstly, I don't like the word because it's been misused and misunderstood. And the I cannot manifest. The I is usually trying to escape something and get something and has an agenda. So that's not manifestation. So I explained all of this, and I explained that trauma, and this was my thing, it's like, I know what I wanted. You know, I wanted to be the real me, and I wanted to have full life, and I wanted to be a gift to humanity, and I wanted all those things, but I could not do that, right? So why could I not do that? Because the I is in separation from the field of, you know, your bubble, and your bubble has all these timelines in it. So when you go into a trauma, you might say, oh, I had this experience, you know, last week, and this happened, right? And you think that's the issue, that thing that happened last week. But when you go into it and you feel deeper and deeper and deeper, like you're sinking down in the ocean to the bottom of the ocean, like you're moving through time from last week to its origin, right? You may find yourself in a birth experience, or in a womb experience, or in a past life experience, or in an ancestral experience, right? You know, what is the beginning of the creation of that timeline? Well, it's not poor me, because if it's in your system, it's part of your lesson, and you have to go through that. Like sometimes you can go straight all the way to the 0 point field, to the absolute, to source, whatever name you like to give it. Or sometimes you can't because your nervous system gets overwhelmed when you go back to that event last week, right? Or when you were a kid. There's like some events that your system has not been able to integrate. So what we're talking about is the integration of these three dantians, or the 7 chakras, or, you know, whichever. I like the dantians. I like the Taoist way of talking about those things. So when you go into that and you reach the 0 point field, you've just wiped out that timeline. It's not about, this is total forgiveness. It's like it's so forgiven that there's no story anymore. So the pain, let's say, has gone from the body. The identity that had the pain has dissolved. And so you are now, you're more connected to your true self, who doesn't have time, right? So this is the work. This is what we've been doing. This is what I've been doing. And that trauma that's inside you, that may only appear when somebody triggers it. Like you're on your own, you're with your dog or your cat, or you're with your friend and you're having a great time. And then something happens, like what you said, something happens. And all of a sudden you've got, you know, sensations in your body, right? The thing that happened is what has a resonance to the trauma that's in your body. So you are actually manifesting that shit event. Now, the I would never choose that, doesn't want to have a hassle. But it's in your field, and your field is magnetic, right? So the universe is giving you that. It's saying, oh, here's something that matches your vibration. And so you have this event. So every event becomes a doorway that enables you to remove that timeline, that enables you, you know. So I want to say, in removing a timeline, some timelines I think have gone in maybe in one sitting, but most timelines, some of them I'm still working on, you know. They've taken years because the disconnect in me was so large. It was like there was no memory, there was no anything, there was no doorway to choose. It was just chaos. So it's you know, each of us has a unique gift and a unique journey, and that's what's important, is to realize that everything that happens is a gift.
Yeah,
it's your soul trying to correct your path. It's like Rumi said, what you're seeking is seeking you, right? So and that's how it's seeking you. It's giving you events that match your vibration.
I think one of the biggest kind of, because I think we all come into anything with certain assumptions or projections that we might not even be aware of. And I think awakening or enlightenment or whatever we want to call it is one of those things. And I think that, I mean, to me, the biggest shock of my journey was just seeing that I always felt that awakening is sort of like transcending the humanness and sort of getting rid of things, you know.
Yes.
I no longer will have these emotions, and I will no longer experience this, and I will no longer experience that. But actually, I have been finding, thankfully, it's exactly the opposite. First of all, awakening experiences were almost like, I know it's not a very savory example, but it really felt like, you know, the toilet plunger. It's like every awakening was like, you know, unblocking clogged toilet that brought more and more shit out to the surface, actually. So it was, so I would say it was the opposite of that. And it was actually not about getting rid of anything. It was more about leaning into what was happening. So to me, this was one of the greatest discoveries of this journey, that the humanness and the every experience exactly as it is, no matter what it is, can literally be a portal into awakening. And
exactly, it is,
right?
It is. And it's kind of like you're going, no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
I want this light experience. And, you know, often I see people who are chasing the light, and my response to them is that the light illuminates the shadow.
Totally.
You know, so you need to be prepared if you're chasing the light that you're going to get the shadow, because it's like the yin yang symbol, that you can't pull them apart. In the shadow is light, and in the light is shadow. And so it's like, well, why is what I do different? The only difference is I'm not chasing the light. I'm chasing the truth. I'm not chasing, it's finding me, because I'm in alignment with that. So, yeah. Also, we talked about openness and curiosity, and we talked about feminine and masculine, and kind of one, it's not a truth, but one simple way of kind of understanding that is that you need the combination of openness and curiosity. And openness is this receptivity, allowance, acceptance, inclusion. Yeah, the whole field. So, you can say, okay, that's my field, or this is my field, or my field is infinite. Whatever your field is, that's fine. Accept it and allow it, and be aware of what's in it, right? And the curiosity, which is more of a masculine, so that openness is more of the feminine, the divine feminine, rather than the wounded feminine. But the masculine is the penetrative force. It's the one that says, what is this? What's going on, right? And not to leave the stillness of the divine masculine to get an answer. I need to know, right? That's the dysfunctional masculine. But to stay in the stillness and be curious. In fact, curiosity can only come from the stillness, because everything else has an agenda. It's only stillness that doesn't have an agenda. So it's that penetrative, and it's discernment. And that was one of my big challenges, discernment. I had no discernment. It was like, it's all one. I can only feel it. I don't feel it.
Right.
Your stuff, like, I'm super empathic, right? So as everybody else's shit feels like me.
Right.
Right. And I say, well, hang on a sec. I only get this when I see them. Well, it's like whatever they're experiencing, if I'm feeling it in me, it's triggering something in me. My system is being triggered into showing me that in their presence. Is it mine? Is it theirs? I don't know. Maybe it's both. But I decided that, at one point, that the only way to work with it was to own it. If it's in my field, it must be mine. And so that discernment is, and it's a big part of the work that I share, is like contrasting energies and exploring energies and accepting and allowing energies and zooming into energies, all these kinds of things provide discernment. It's like, for me, I couldn't discern between my trauma and my I am, let's say, the I am. And that's because I had literally did have head injuries. So at some point it was like, okay, how to find that discernment is purely through contrasting. It's like, I can't see what I can't see. I don't know what I don't know. But I can see what I can see, and I can see, and like I call this blind spots. I had somebody recently who had a blind spot in their thyroid area, right? She has the thyroid disease. So it's like, you can't go in there. It's like, whatever's in there, you don't want. The eye does not want to see it. It doesn't want to go in there. It's like, it's protecting you. There's too much in there that you can't be with, like maybe too much sadness or something.
Yeah.
But you can see the edge of it. So it's like, okay, let's say that this part is hidden. Go behind. Is that available to your consciousness? Go to the side, go underneath. So just get a picture of all around it, right? And then at what point does the thing that you feel become blank? Just the edge. So you've got this field of blank. And you sit on the edge of that field of blank, right? Because that is, I don't know if you know, the Vesica Piscis is the meeting point. You can see it in my logo, right? I have a logo.
Yeah.
That's the Vesica Piscis. It's an ancient symbol. Sacred geometry has been a big part of my journey. But it's the meeting point of two different things. So when two things meet, they can integrate or unify, right? If enough stillness is available, because if there's anything else beyond stillness, there's an identity. So when you look at the edges of things, you either find a gap, or you find a meeting point, or there's an overlap. So instead of there just being two experiences, there's now three. There's this, what I can see, and there's that, what I can't see. And then there's a meeting point, and I go sit on the meeting point. And that will transmute both ends. That'll transmute the blind spot, the blank spot, and the bit that you can see. Right? So that's the kind of alchemy work that you're doing, is differentiating. Differentiation gives you discernment, because if you're not, like for me, I was not differentiating at all. So at some level, I appeared to be the master of it all, but at another level, right, I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of, it wasn't that I was afraid of this or that. I was afraid of life. I was afraid of death, and I was afraid of life, right? So it was like, let's have some discernment here, right? So there was a huge I there. And it was a kind of a funny experience, because it was like, I am the I am. Because I was transcended. I used to have, maybe 20 something years ago, I would have these Shushumna experiences, which you can only have when you've transcended your body, right? Now, I had not transcended my body, but I was so disconnected from it that I was having like columns of light breathing through my whole system, like that. So it's like, okay, so that for me is an initiation experience. It shows me where I'm going, right? But before I get there, I have to see everything that's blocking me from being there.
Yeah. Have you read The Collision with the Infinite? I forgot her name now. Anyway, it's a book about this woman who basically had this massive dissolution of self experience, and she was literally suffering for 10 years. Because at the time, there was no YouTube, there was no like people to go, and she went to therapists, and she tried to understand what was going on with her, because she had this constant sense of there's nobody here, like the body just moves and does things. So she had still achieved things and even managed to raise her daughter and so on, but she was in a constant state of that kind of out of body sort of experience, and it brought a lot of suffering. And she genuinely had this, when she went to therapists or psychiatrists, and they started talking to her about trauma, and that perhaps she should start looking at this, she literally would say, but who is looking at this? Who is this? Who did that trauma happen to? And it wasn't fake. It was genuinely, she suffered so much because she couldn't reconcile the two, and she didn't understand how to even approach this. And I think that sometimes people who talk that way, I feel like it's more intellectual, but in her case, this was a completely lived experience. And so
I can relate.
Can you talk actually a little bit about that? And what do you say to people who say, oh, this trauma talk, whatever, it's like, who cares? This is happening to nobody. And like, ultimately none of it matters. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it matters and it doesn't matter, because, if I take the position of the enlightened one, it doesn't matter, but what's happening to the human one? So, like for me, all trauma is physiological, right? It's not just the energy. Like I said before, the energy, the body, the whole matter is actually just energy, right? It's like you can't find anything if you look in it. It's just empty. You get to empty. Whatever you look at, you'll get to empty if you're going to its origin. So, but at the same time, like I did have some traumatic brain injuries, and I had a lot of what they call mini strokes, and I lost this hemisphere, and what happens when you lose a chunk of brain, the rest of the brain takes over, which is the amazing survival ability, and, new neurological pathways get made. And so then I was stuck as with, this is like the super conscious side. This was the super wounded side, right? So, at a practical level, I can tell you that there was fluoride in my brain, and, mercury and all these different things. And I can also tell you that the structure was impaired. I mean, what happened to me in a big time to my nervous system, as a shock, it's like my body was stuck in a shock, right? And I couldn't heal like other people because the cells don't let anything to change because you're stuck in this place. So anyway, then that you when you go deeper and deeper, like you were saying before, things become more subtle.
Mm-hmm.
And in some way that's true. But for me, at the same time that the more subtle became true, it got louder and louder. It's like if I said that this was life and this was death, and I'm unifying those two into one because they are one, then as they got closer and closer and closer, the material got louder and louder and louder. So so I have this. I don't know how different it is for other people, but I always say to people, it can get worse before it gets better. And so I've learned to recognize that things can be awful. For me, they have been. It's like the levels of pain that I've had to go through to heal. Like some of the nerves are not myelinated, so it's like they're hypersensitive. And then you have another big healing experience, and that the pain levels are so high that it's very difficult to be present to that kind of pain, right? So you can't be present to it, actually. That's what I decided. So then you just do a lot of self-care to get through it. What would make me feel better now? Okay, I'll have a shower, have a cold shower, right? Or sit in the sun, or whatever. So you do what you do. So for me, I wanted to say that it's physiological, so it can take a longer time to heal. And two, it's always very good to put a stick in the ground of where you're going. So in the experience that you're sharing about, it's like that person cannot find a self. There's no self. And yet there's trauma and suffering. So who's having the trauma and who's having the suffering? And like for me, there's a disconnect. The vagus nerve was disconnected from the gut, was not talking. Pituitary gland was not communicating, to the adrenal glands or anything else. So it's like there's a lot that has to happen. Now, a lot of people will go and get intervention for that, but because I'm willing to die, it just heals. It doesn't heal in one meditation, but it's like I feel that the soul that's seeking me, the soul that I'm seeking is giving me little messages. They pop up on my screen, or they pop up when I'm walking the dog, or different things are happening, and if I'm paying attention, those messages are coming. So there's the experience potentially of knowing that there's no self in a direct experience way without trauma, because you're no longer hooking into it. You're totally okay with being nobody, right?
Yes.
You're totally okay with not having a future or a past. And that's one state. The other state is I can't find myself. What self are you talking about? I can't see her. And there's a lot of suffering that is going with it. That would describe me. So it's like at some point you've got to discern what's not you and what's you. Sometimes you can't see you, but you can see what's not you. And you work on these dualistic ways and polarities until the system starts to shift into a new view. Also, when I'm looking for information, I'm feeling in my body the response to what I'm reading about or looking at, right? And so I'm aware if there's a resonance.
Yeah, but I think that like so many people are so completely disconnected from their bodies that they don't even understand what that means to check if something resonates or not. I mean, it's actually kind of interesting that my second powerful awakening experience actually brought me back in touch with my body and not the other way around. And
that's great.
It actually made me realize how completely disconnected I was from my body my entire life. But yeah, I think I think it took about 10 years. I might be wrong, but I know that she later on had a massive heart opening and had a lot of traumas come up, and that feeling or that sensation lasted for 10 years, sort of settled, and she was able to look at this stuff and acknowledge and so on. What do you say to those who say, because I didn't have easy childhood, let's put it this way. I mean, it was it was, fear was my first companion. You know what I mean? Like, that's, if you ask me what do I remember the most from my childhood, I would say fear. Then if you had asked me if I feel traumatized, I would have said no. I don't feel like I have any
Yeah.
traumas,
But this
or
is
I
this is
don't
how
feel.
that's how blank spots happen, because sometimes the trauma is not what happened. It's what should have happened but didn't happen.
Right. Yeah.
So your system doesn't know what should have happened but didn't happen. It's never had the experience of that. So you don't feel traumatized because that just feels normal to you.
Right. Exactly. And so
You don't have a contrast.
exactly. And I think that sometimes there's this kind of misunderstanding that, especially people who either don't recall any traumatic event, or, for example, see trauma, because that was also my view, that I, for whatever reason, thought of trauma as something really big, something incredibly, like a big event that is incredibly memorable, that had an impact.
Yeah,
But
well,
also there.
you don't it depends when the trauma happens. If it happened
Mhm.
before you had a conscious mind, it's much more deeper buried, which was my situation. It's like
Yeah.
um you don't have a pathway to a memory because you were living in a state of consciousness, including like womb traumas and conception traumas and all those developmental traumas.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people in that situation, and we don't really realize it. It's just we've normalized it, and that's what you're
Normalized
saying.
it, and the bypassing, especially like within spirituality, this is also how it happens, because, well, if I don't feel traumatized, then it means I'm fine, like, you know what I mean, like there
But
is no
you
issue.
do feel
Yeah.
trauma. It's just that you can't put your finger on it. You feel something. You
Right.
feel this disquiet in your soul that says something's not quite right here, and but you can't find words to describe it because it's before you had words, right? It's pre-verbal. It's like for me, my trauma was quite a big thing as well, because it happened to me before I could talk, and it happened to me before I could walk. So the only thing that my nervous system could do was freeze, right? And so this last 6 or 7 years, I've pulled away from doing whatever I used to do and just
Mm-hmm.
went on a deep dark dive into the unknown, and to try to discover. And this is where I discover it's like, is what happened to me was bad enough, but also what didn't happen. The traumas, both sides. It's like what happened was, very painful. Cried for four
Mm-hmm.
days without stopping. Apparently, I'm told that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't have a conscious memory. And at the same time, my mother wasn't there. She was at work. My father wasn't there. When they showed, this was before I grew up in Africa. So this was before there wasn't any telephones. So when my parents showed up, instead of feeling safe and loved, they freaked out. And that they freaked out, I don't know what I thought. I don't know if I was even thinking, but my system somehow wired something in that I'm the problem. I'm making them freak out.
Yeah.
Right? So then I had to look after my parents so they didn't freak out. So how did I
Oh.
do that? I just shut down,
Yeah.
because everything I do that they don't like, they freak out.
Yeah.
So, it was what you're doing when you're healing trauma is that you're healing your parents for sure. And you're becoming your own parent, right? So you've got your dysfunctional feminine and your divine feminine, and the same with the masculine. It's like there's four of you here, you've got to know each one, you've got to discern each one, and then you've got to choose the one that you want to be, right? And even if you can't find the experience of something, you can imagine it. And the body doesn't know the difference between what really happened and what you imagine. And you can stop talking about the stuff that distresses you, because that's a process of re-traumatizing and recreating it.
Yeah.
So it's not easy. Well, I certainly haven't found it easy.
No, it's not easy. And actually, it's been amazing to see how, and you mentioned that, I think, at the start, where This is actually a process, and there's layers, like for example, I discovered my huge fear of conflict, of and how much I've been walking on eggshells, even though generally speaking, I have a reputation for being sort of very direct and honest and outspoken, and that is also true about
Yes.
me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there have been relationships and different dynamics where I really just would suppress so much out of fear of
Yes.
conflict and so on. But what's been amazing, I could have said, oh yeah, I got it now. I saw the wound, I saw where that came from and everything. And actually only recently another layer kind
Comes.
of
Yeah.
exposed itself, in that I couldn't believe, Leonora, that I was literally catapulted into when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And I realized I was already then feeling responsible for other people's emotions. I
Yes.
couldn't believe it. This such an early age. I
Yes,
felt
because
responsible for, that my parents are okay and everybody's okay. And that
yes,
carried, obviously,
yes, I
there
had
was
the same
it was another layer of the walking on eggshells, not
for
saying
sure.
something because I feel responsible for how it's going to make someone feel.
Yes, I totally relate to that
Mm,
because for me it was the same in that my safety was dependent on them being okay,
yeah,
right? So if they're not okay, then I can't be okay because I'm a
yeah,
dependent infant, right? So, you just feel compassion for your journey when you reach those realizations and you stop
yeah,
going, like the one we were talking before of the one who's here to fix it.
yeah,
That person will never find that compassion because, it's not that my parents did anything wrong. They were very well meaning. They were both very traumatized also. That's another story. I come from a
yes,
long line of
yeah,
traumatized individuals.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and we're all passing it to each other. So
Mm,
yeah, it's the conflict, the avoidance of conflict is an indication of the inner conflict between the identity and vulnerability.
yeah,
Yeah, between the masculine and feminine.
yeah.
So and so at some point when you're willing to give up your whatever mastery you think you have, you will life will show you the vulnerable pieces. And then it's not about mastery, it's about can you meet this moment.
Totally. And this is why, it's like and I think that's probably a good point to kind of end on, which is so many people, and that would for sure include myself, were at some point looking for some kind of end point. And I think that end point is gonna, everybody will have their own ideas of what that end point, the ideal of an end point and what that's gonna look like. And I think that for me it's just one of the kind of outcomes of this journey has been the end of looking for an end
Yeah,
point because
that's great.
and it's like, and just seeing this whole awakening as more like a verb, and I truly believe that, like, for as long as we're in this physical body, stuff's gonna come up, and I loved when you talk about, coming closer to the edges, because if you never expose yourself to life and different dynamics and different people, then you will never know those edges, because I mean it's
Right.
it's easy to stay zen in a cave, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And
So,
sometimes it's necessary to do
and
that
sometimes it's necessary, of
because
course.
the people in conflict can often be necessary to find the differentiation
Yeah.
that you can't see. You just say, "Oh, well, I'm this," and I avoid conflict. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good step that you know something. But it's like, what does conflict feel like, and what does not conflict feel like? Well, I never had the experience of not conflict, so I don't know what that is. So you're already hampered because your frame of reference doesn't hold what should have been, right?
Yeah.
That's been excluded from you. So you've got to try to find that experience without knowing what it feels like. So
Yeah.
all you can do is imagine, or you find your happy place in nature. Nature's a very good healer,
Yes.
So we do all these things, but it's like every time you have this kind of realization of what you're dealing with, it's like, oh my God, there is no path. There is no, there's no, the end point is also the beginning point. It's not
Exactly.
a point.
It's like a perpetual beginning. It's like, or whatever. It's like, yeah, exactly. And it's just, and I also loved so much because I think part of that is also just really living in that not knowing, which
Yeah.
instead of sparking fear, because so much of not knowing triggers fear initially, like, well, I need to know, I need to figure out. And that's like, and then it turns into just that curiosity that we talked about, and not holding on to
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's that's why I say, even though in some way it's been very valuable for me to share some of this, because I haven't shared this kind of thing in a public way, because I've been hiding in my cave as a necessary part of my journey.
Yeah.
But with always with the intention of coming out and emerging from
Yes.
it. But I didn't want to come out and be a healer, right? So I don't want to be anybody. I just want to be me, right? So I was recently invited to teach from one of my oldest students from way back.
Mm-hmm.
I said, yeah, I can do that, and so I say this is a workshop for you, but it's also a workshop for me, because I'm checking who's showing up to do this workshop, the one who knows or the one who doesn't know. And so
Brilliant.
yeah, and so it is valuable, and I really feel the capacity, let's say now, to not show up as the master, and just to show up as all the different facets of me can come together. You get the whole thing. You can't exclude any part of me. It's like it's all or nothing for me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about if people were interested to check out and see what you do, where do they go to do? Are you back to work now, basically? Are you working one-on-one with people?
Yes, I can do if I'm invited to. I don't do any marketing, unfortunately or fortunately. I just don't feel any resonance to do that kind of thing. And I love that you contacted me. I don't know you, and I feel like I know you more now. We have a lot in common.
Yes.
So I love invitations. So, this workshop that I'm doing, Exit the Matrix, which is nearly finished, was an invitation. So I'm open to all invitations, and as a stick in the ground of my life and my gift to share, I'm here to share this gift with others, and I want to do that as best as I can for the good of all of us. So but I don't know if this will heal. It's almost like there needs to be an invitation. I don't want to convince anybody to do this work.
Yes. You're not gonna chase. You're not
No,
gonna
I don't want to
impose. You're
do
not
that.
gonna.
I don't want to
Yeah.
promise them happiness even, It's like, I feel it's a bit of a challenge, because, at some point you have to put yourself on the map so that people can find you.
Yeah.
But, I'm hoping somebody technical will show up to help me do that at some point, but we'll see. But if you want to contact me, you can get me from leonorarose.com or emboditruth.com. I'm also very rarely on Facebook, but I have a group there. I'm not using it. I've been recently considering, setting myself up on Substack, because that's an environment where I can say what I want. And it has video.
And you're a great writer, because I read a few of your blogs. So Substack sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
But I want to say, and I know that we've just met, and I've only watched one conversation with you, but I cannot underline how incredibly valuable is to have someone on this journey of awakening that help us meet certain things that are difficult to meet.
I agree.
And there's a lot of it. I mean, my journey unfolded in such a way that most of it had to be done on my own, and was done on my own, and that's okay. That was, that. But there was a bit of support that sort of arrived when it was most needed, and it was invaluable. So, and to be able to also meet someone who's been on this journey for 30 years, and who, I mean, I can't tell you how refreshing it is to hear someone who's been on this journey for like 30 years and keeps on saying, oh, I'm still exploring this, I'm still looking at this, I'm still whatever, you know. To me, my heart just rejoices when I hear this, because it just speaks to that kind of notion that there is an end point.
There's a intention within my being as a soul to share the work that I do and to help others. And because, you know, it could say that it's not I that's awakening, it's we that are awakening, you know, so I'm not an isolated thing. And so, and also that when I'm engaged in a workshop or something like that, or a session, the way that I do it, and I've done it this way for years, is I'm discovering myself. I'm not healing you or fixing you. I'm just noticing what's happening. And I see different things than you see because you have a different matrix to me. And so I can point you to them. You know, I see this sensation somewhere. Do you see that? And okay.
But there's also incredible power in just, you know, at least the way I sense people, you know, you can just tell when someone been through hell, you know what I mean? They were nailed, they were on their knees, you know, and probably not, no, probably more than once, you know. And so there's capacity to hold the discomfort of others, no matter what it, which is so beautiful. And because sometimes even great therapists will have, you know, their limit to going places with someone, you know, because something fires off.
You can only help someone to the point where you've been there already.
You've been yourself.
If you haven't been there, you can't. You unnoticing, you step into your identity to be in the situation. So, you know, also like when I'm doing one-on-one with a person, it's like I'm discovering, oh, oops, oh, there's my healer just popped in, that identity, you know, and so then I'm clearing her because she's can only see how she sees, you know, and I don't need to look through her eyes. I want to look through just pure awareness, right? So it's not that I do it right every time, you know. There's no such thing as failure. Failure just enables you to learn more, right? So, you know, we have this thing, I can't fail, I need to succeed. It's like, no, you can't succeed until you fail. And actually failure and success are not separate. It's just your mind that's separating them.
And sometimes, you know, sometimes even not, you know, when you can have someone who will just let you unravel without, and just holding the space for that instead of, even if nothing is said, you know what I mean? Like that in of itself can be when we feel that we can say maybe the most shameful stuff or the ugly things and whatever we want to call it, and not be judged by that, and just be free to say it exactly the way it comes through for us. Then it's such a gift in that, you know.
I feel, you know, like I don't engage too much with the stories with people. If they need to share, they can share. While they're sharing, they need to be feeling, because there's the disconnect, you know, and you can't heal it by sharing it alone. Sharing it can be really valuable and you can heal it to some extent, but you can't heal it with just that consciousness. You have to be aware of the heart and aware of the belly. You have to be able to feel the felt sense. So like when somebody's telling me a story in my group, that's fine. I like to hear their story. It gives me a lot of information. But the information that I'm getting is not because I'm listening to their words. It's partly because I'm listening to the field, right? And if they are listening to the field, then they're learning about themselves, and they can tell you later if you ask them, now, were you telling the truth, or were you not telling the truth, or what was happening for you when you were telling that story? Oh, I took a position of the wounded one, and you know, whatever. So it's like, it's not me seeing it that's important, it's them seeing it that's important, you know. It's having the direct experience of what's appearing in their field. So that takes a little bit of practice, because usually when you start to speak, you disconnect from your field, which is interesting. So I teach people to stay connected while they're talking and while they're listening. And
yeah, even the talking about feelings can be how resistance toward what
yes,
what wants to be
yes,
felt actually works. So yeah, totally, there's a huge difference between like talking what was shameful and actually allowing ourselves to feel that shame fully. It's like
yes,
two different
yeah,
experiences.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
brilliant.
who's judging it as shameful? Who is that?
Yeah, also, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. Yeah, which is precisely the, speaks to the point that I was making, that to have someone like that who sees those angles and
I
can
agree.
open up to a different perspective, and in such an open and curious and compassionate way, is absolutely invaluable. So, Leonora, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for inviting me. And it was lovely to meet you and to, get a sense of who you are, and blessings to you for the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much. And I will include all the details as to how to find Leonora, as always, in the description of the video. Thank you so much.
Okay, blessings.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.